Chapter 7, An Unpleasant Discovery. My friends in room 26 had been thinking so much about boats, I was relieved to be at the Brisbane's house, where they always paid a lot of attention to me. You can imagine my surprise when they continued to think of nothing but boats all weekend, too. Mr. Brisbane read about model sailboats, sketched them, and worked on them in his garage workshop. Meanwhile, Mrs. Brisbane kept busy writing things on a piece of paper. Every once in a while, she'd stop and chuckle. When I first met Mrs. Brisbane, she never chuckled. In fact, she hardly ever smiled because of Mr. Brisbane's automobile accident. But slowly, over time, she regained her sense of humor. Maybe I helped just a little bit. Still, it was unusual for her to sit and chuckle in a room all by herself. People often say and do very strange things in front of me, almost as if I'm invisible. Finally, Mr. Brisbane came in from the garage. "You're still working on your list?" he asked. "Yes," she said, chuckling again. "I tell you, this is going to be one fun field trip." So that was it. She was planning the picnic at Potter's Pond. Oh, what I would give to get a peek at her list. Luckily, the Brisbanes started yawning early, and even though I would have liked to have them set up a nice obstacle course for me to run, I wasn't that sorry to see them go to bed. You see, I had a plan. And when a hamster has a plan, nothing, well, almost nothing, can stand in his way. I waited until the house was very, very, very quiet. Then I fiddled with my cage door, and as usual, it swung right open. Thank goodness for my lock that doesn't lock. I was feeling especially adventurous because the only peril I faced at the Brisbane's house was the possibility of being caught outside my cage. I was willing to take the chance because I had a mission, to find out more about the picnic at Potter's Pond. I could see that the list was sitting right on Mrs. Brisbane's desk. Of course, before I set out, I had to map my route, just like sailors and even pirates do. I slid down the leg of the low table where my cage sat and scurried across the carpet. It felt nice on my paws, but I couldn't move as fast on it as I can on all those shiny, slippery floors. The desk looked like a mountain to a small hamster like me. However, I knew that where there's a will and a plan, there's a way. Close to the desk, there was a nice cozy chair with a striped blanket draped over it. I grabbed onto the blanket and pulled myself up, paw over paw. Then hopped onto the desk. There was Mrs. Brisbane's list right in front of me. I was pretty excited until I looked more closely and saw that Mrs. Brisbane had a rectangular paperweight angled on top of the list, blocking part of the writing. I could only make out parts of a few words. My heart was pounding. Lun. Were we studying the lungs? Was something going to lunge at us? Or maybe it was lunch. That's what I was hoping for. Tray made my heart pound a little. It surely meant treasure. Captain just had to be a captain. Was a real ship captain coming along? Or was it the captain of a pirate ship? Eek! What about those colors? Were blue and red the color of the jewels in the treasure? And what on earth was Secret G? Secret guy? Secret girl? Secret gold? It could be so many things. I tried moving the paper around so I could read the rest of the words, but it wouldn't budge. I pushed the paperweight with all my might, but I couldn't move it an inch. It must have been made of solid rock. I was still struggling with it when I heard Mr. and Mrs. Brisbane talking. Goodness, I thought they were asleep. I quickly dived off the desk and slid down the chair cover, which was like a bumpy slide. I landed on the seat, paused to catch my breath, then continued to slide down the leg of the chair. Next, I scurried across the floor to the table. I was moving fast, but I skidded to a stop when I realized I had no idea how to get back up. I certainly couldn't slide up the table leg. Still, I'm a clever hamster, so I stayed calm and checked out the area. I breathed a sigh of relief when I discovered a big stack of magazines on the floor. I carefully climbed up them one by one. However, when I made the leap to the table, my back paws pushed the top magazine off the whole stack, collapsed with a loud thump. I dashed into my cage and pulled the door behind me. A few seconds later, Mrs. Brisbane came shuffling out of the bedroom wearing her robe and slippers. "I'll check it out, Bert. I'm sure it's nothing." She turned on the light and looked around the living room. "Sorry to wake you, Humphrey," she said, while I tried to look as innocent as possible. Then she saw the heap of magazines. "Oh, that's what it was." She shook her head. "I hope they didn't scare you." "Just a little," I squeaked, even though I knew she couldn't understand me. "I'll straighten these up tomorrow," she said, turning off the light. As she was close to the bedroom door, I heard her tell Bert, "You're going to have to build me a magazine rack." "I'll be happy to," he replied, after the boat race. It was quiet for the rest of the night, but I didn't sleep a wink because of what I'd seen on Mrs. Brisbane's list, especially the mysterious secret G. The boat race at Potter's Pond, the maps, and the colorful treasure certainly sounded exciting. With a pirate captain along, it could be scary and even dangerous. Still, the more I thought about it, the more I knew that scary or not, I didn't want to miss that boat race for anything in the world. I slept in late on Sunday and awoke revived and refreshed. The Brisbanes were in a happy mood, and so was I. After all, I was going on a treasure hunt soon, or so I hoped. In the afternoon, Mr. Brisbane brought a model sailboat into the living room. It was a fine-looking craft with a crisp yellow sail and a bright red hull. "I couldn't resist making a boat of my own," he told Mrs. Brisbane. "It's great, but only a student can win the prize," she replied. "I know," Bert said. He set the boat on the table and opened my cage door. "Let's see what kind of sailor Humphrey would make," he said. Mrs. Brisbane quickly stacked up books around the edge of the table so I couldn't escape. "I don't think he'll like it one bit," she said. I couldn't believe that my teacher, who is smart most of the time, could be so wrong. I'd make an incredible sailor, I just knew it. Mr. Brisbane gently sat me in the boat. "See, Humphrey, it's just your size." Yes, it was exactly my size. I felt as if I'd been born to sail in that boat. I stood at the bow, that's the front of the ship, and imagined myself setting sail for a far-off island in search of hidden treasure. "Looks like he's a born sailor," Mr. Brisbane observed. "Now there's a smart man." "Don't be ridiculous," his wife said. "I wouldn't let Humphrey get within sight of the water." "What an unsqueakable thing to say." "Why?" Mr. Brisbane asked. Why, I asked too. "Because hamsters must never get wet," Mrs. Brisbane explained. "They catch chills easily and get sick or even die. Plus, water removes the good oils in a hamster's fur. You really should read up on hamsters the way I have, Bert." My heart sank to the bottom of my paws. This was worse news than anything Mrs. Wright ever said. "Guess you're not going to Potter's Pond, my friend," Mr. Brisbane told me. I felt like I was spinning without my wheel. I felt sick with disappointment. I felt just about as bad as I did when Ms. Mack left and broke my hamster heart. "No way," Mrs. Brisbane agreed. "Besides, the poor thing would be terrified." A lot she knew. She had no idea of the fur-raising adventures I'd had, and I'd hardly ever been terrified except by large and unfriendly animals like Miranda's dog Clem. Mr. Brisbane put me back in my cage. "Sorry, Humphrey," he said. "You think you're sorry," I squeaked. "I'm about the sorriest creature in the world." They laughed at my squeaking, which hurt my feelings, but I forgave them. They're only humans after all. "A landlubber's life is a sorry one, me hearties. I pity the poor wretch who's ever known life on the briny deep." From Jolly Roger's Guide to Life by I.C. Waters.